All right, I'm going to turn off my video and then we'll just go ahead and get started. Okay, so if you, this is part of the learning collaborative with a Washington State Healthcare Authority, and today's session is going to be how to support landlords and the people in your programs. So if you don't know me, I'm Nikki Stevens. I'm a certified public manager and I hold a master's in interdisciplinary studies, which includes social justice and human rights. And I have worked the last 20 plus years of my career in serving people experiencing homelessness, acting as a housing director, a chief programs officer, I've done I've administered probably every single intervention there is to end someone's homelessness, from rapid rehousing to permanent supportive housing, transitional housing. I've also done homeless outreach as well. So that's kind of where my experience come from. I'm in the beautiful state of Arizona, and in my time in Arizona, I administered a permanent supportive housing program for people who with serious mental illness, who mostly were chronically homeless, but that was the criteria, seriously mentally ill and homeless to qualify. So my experience comes from working with that population. So we had over 2,500 units. We're the largest provider of permanent supportive housing at that time. So a lot of my experience comes from there. Currently, I am a senior consultant and trainer, and my jam is housing and homelessness. And that's a little bit about myself, and I'll go ahead and get started. Okay, and today we'll talk, I did my intro. We're going to talk about preparing your team and staff for engaging with landlords, engaging in landlords, and also one of the most important pieces is housing stability. And here at Advocates for Human Potential, and I know for sure the state of Washington believes everyone deserves a safe place to call home. So I'm going to try to be as engaging as possible. Hopefully you all will participate with me. Feel free to come off mute, or it's going to be hard for me to see people's hands raised. So just come off mute and talk, or put it in the chat and I'll catch it later. Unless Gretchen, you want to look at the chat for me, keep an eye on that. That would be helpful. Okay, so the first question is, when you think about supporting long-term housing stability for participants in your program, what feels most challenging in your role right now? Does anybody want to come off mute?
Hi.
Yes, please.
Um, I feel like I've run into a lot of um s- problems supporting my client exiting, living in encampments on the streets, that environment, and then them transitioning into a four walls uh living environment and how to help them with that transition because it's so multifaceted and it's
Yes.
their behavioral health, their usage that's than their community. And so it's that for me. It's a little bit of a bigger issue, but
Yeah. No, that's great. And I totally agree with that. We're going to touch on some of that. Hopefully, I can give you a little bit of insight based on my experience as well. But all of that, all of your concerns are valid. Alicia Brown, I see your hand up. Please come off mute.
Hi, my name's Alicia.
Alicia, sorry.
This way, I'm a community health worker, and the most challenging thing that I've been experiencing is the coordinated entry process.
Yes,
Patients usually do
yes,
the coordinated entry. They're told they're going to be put on this wait list, and then, they I feel like it's kind of false advertisement and it's false hope because since I've been a community health worker for the past 2 years, maybe one of my patients have been called back to be helped with housing. Um, and that's
yes,
kind of disheartening, a little frustrating, especially because I was previously working with like elderly and sick and disabled, and then now I
yes.
transition into women's health. So I work with a lot of pregnant mothers, and there are some who are homeless. The shelters, they've been closing down a lot of shelters in the Pacific Northwest. So, and it's just that's been those have been my biggest challenges when finding long-term housing stability. And it's also frustrating because you see all these new housing projects, all these
Yep.
apartments being
Yep.
built, but they're still not affordable.
100%. You nailed it. And that's one of the biggest challenges. Let's start with coordinated entry. We know is a challenge, right? I administer the coordinated entry system here in Maricopa County in Arizona. And boy, was that, just even getting it going. And then the waiting list, which is like 5,000 people long. And it's just a really arduous process. And, with the federal funding, issues that are going on. There's, maybe bigger concerns coming down the road. But those are all valid points. And I want to tell you, I see you, I feel you, I agree with you. Thank you, everyone. And I see the chat's busy. I appreciate it. I'll try to circle back later and look at those, only because I can't see everything while I'm presenting. So my apologies about that. So everyone's role matters. So from the frontline staff to housing navigators and case managers, you all play a critical role in supporting participants or tenants through the day-to-day housing stability, while also preparing them for transition to longer-term housing options. So program manager leads are responsible for building that, the structures, partnerships, policies to make those transitions possible and sustainable. And everyone plays a role in the sustainability, because it requires alignment from all levels of staffing. And preparing staff, some of the challenges we're tackling together would be, preparing staff to engage with landlords, finding housing, finding landlords that will rent to our clientele. I saw some of those pop up in your in the chat. And also keeping the number one is obviously if we get somebody housed, keeping them housed. So one of the first things is to define the roles of the housing navigator, caseworker, housing specialist, who does what and who's responsible for what. I know some of y'all are doing all and above, so I understand that. So one of the things, if it's possible, if you have the money within your program, is to invest in a housing stability case manager, where their full-time job is about retention. It's about keeping people housed. It's also about locating landlords if possible. So this includes crisis intervention with landlords and other risks for any other risks of losing housing. And when you're preparing to engage with landlords, ensure, the staff that are going out to talk to landlords are trained in fair housing and source of income protection laws, and they can educate landlords, and ensure staff are trained in the state laws around landlord responsibilities, the fair housing laws and landlord and tenant laws, and ensure staff are trained in motivational interviewing, trauma-informed care, and obtaining documents. So it's important to define all the affordable housing near you that participants may be eligible for and get on those waiting lists if possible. So, if you, even if they're, we would put everybody on every list there was. So, because you never know when an opening becomes available. Also ensuring participants are document ready before showing a unit. Do they have an ID card? Do they have a social security card or a social security number? And be prepared in advance to discuss the issues with the landlord, such as, if somebody has bad credit or no credit or a criminal history and issues with any past rental history. So it's always important that you're prepared because those questions will come up. And also, you don't want to go out and search for a landlord, and pay those fees and have somebody apply and they don't accept felons and your participant is a felon. So making sure you're doing that homework up front, or if you have somebody on your team that can do that homework up front. We created spreadsheets that basically, we had all the landlords that were available. We had, do they accept felons? Do they accept sex offenders? Do they accept arsonists? All those types of things. And we included what the fees were, how many bedrooms there were. So creating an Excel spreadsheet that helps you know that information is helpful. And also don't set participants up for failure. get like I said, get the rental criteria before paying any of those fees to process the application or hold the unit, and discuss those challenges with landlords as necessary, and identify those units in advance that allow for bad credit and poor rental history, or that accept people with certain criminal backgrounds. So, pop quiz. Which one of these animals is a service animal? Anyone?
Dogs only. Only dogs can be legally recognized as service animals under the ADA.
Okay, I saw a quick chat. Somebody already got it right. It is dogs and one more animal.
Mini horse.
Yep, the dogs and the horses, despite what we think. Those cute little mini horses, which I wish I could get one, uh, qualify as a service animal. And I've had people in my programs that have had miniature horses, and it is true. So it's not the birds, not the bunnies, which the bunnies are super cute, but it is the miniature horses and the dogs. But what if the person has 17 rabbits? Have you guys ever experienced that where somebody's like, well, I just want to bring my 2 bunnies with me. And then 2 weeks later, there's 17 bunnies. So, you know, have you ever experienced a time when a participant wanted something that was out of the ordinary or unreasonable or unsafe? And I think we all have, and just for time purposes, I won't call on all of you, but I think we've all had. So it's important that you know your local fair housing laws and things like that, because you want to make sure it's reasonable for the participant. You don't want to set them up for failure. You also want to keep it real with them and balance. You want to empower them, but balance it with what makes sense. Okay, so finding landlords. So we all know right now, finding landlords is like finding a needle in the haystack. You can find one that accepts your program, has the fair market rents, hopefully utilities included, and accepts background issues, all that stuff that we know happens, um, isn't just something that we need to keep an eye on. And is also, one of the parts of this is the virtual search, right? So one of the first things you could do is just start by looking online. That's probably the easiest way to start. So again, if you could identify someone on your team that's all they do is they do a virtual search. And they're looking and they're compiling a list, create an Excel spreadsheet, and of what those criteria are for those. It makes it easier when you're trying to get someone housed, because you're not running around from apartment to apartment. They don't accept your participant. So doing that virtual search is the first part of this. Then there's the physical search. Sometimes you can find those little nook and cranny places. You see a for rent sign, it's a mom and pop place, and you can go and talk to them. And sometimes we found those were some of our best landlords. They really cared. They wanted to actually contribute to something in the community. So if you have somebody, again, on your team that you can identify as that person who could go and look physically, and when you're driving by places and you see something, write it down, give them a call, give the landlord a call. You never know. And also the snowballing effect where, your landlord has a great experience with you all because you're answering your calls and you're following up and you're paying the rent on time, all that good stuff. It actually snowballs and you're able to identify other landlords. I have, times where landlords would call me up and say, hey, Nikki, I have a unit available. Do you have anybody that you'd like to place in there? Only because we had a great relationship with them. They knew they would get their rent on time. They knew we would answer our phones, all those things. So those relationships with landlords are extremely important in the long run. And also, we often think that landlords know fair housing. Most of them do not. They're just landlords. They just rent out their units, but they don't understand fair housing laws. So your part of your job, or the job of the person, if you can get somebody to do this full time, is to the participant understanding the participant and program relationship, the guidelines of the housing program. And you should know those as well before you approach a landlord, so you can answer any of those questions and you feel confident in answering those questions. And, such as what it pays for and what it does not pay for. How long is the support provided? The HQS inspections, the housing quality standards inspections, all of that type of stuff. And part of our advocacy and our support for the people in the programs is to, make sure that we're supporting our participants, that they know we educate them as well, that they are living in a safe place. And again, advocating for that potential tenant and understanding what programs cannot offer, making sure you have clear expectations with the tenant. So, when you have a tenant or participant, they understand this is what the program does, this is what the program does not. This is what your portion of rent is, this is what our portion is. And and also understand the application process and the document readiness. As we know, those leases and even filling out some of those applications are arduous. And some of our folks don't have a high reading level, or they may have a traumatic brain injury or using substances. So making sure that you're educating your tenants on all of those things, on their rights and their responsibilities, and also how to be a good neighbor. Sometimes folks have not had their own place to live, so they don't really know how to be a good neighbor or know, how to mitigate any issues with we've all had irritating next door neighbors, I think. And how do you mitigate that? How do you mediate between that? Okay, so let's talk about, and maybe some of you have participated in my training when I talked about the first 90 days. And if you don't know, the first 90 days is in permanent supportive housing is the most critical and crucial in the support for them in the long term. If somebody could be successfully housed for 90 days, they're most likely to be successful for the full term of their lease and for a longer period of time. So I'm going to pivot and talk about the first 90 days and beyond for tenants and landlords. Any questions before I transition? Okay. I know there's a lot of chat going on, which I appreciate. Um, okay, so one of the first things I always encourage folks to do when you have a new tenant or participant is they meet the team, right? The team that will be supporting them. So they meet the case manager. They know who the landlord is. They know who the support staff is. Is there a housing specialist, case manager, leasing? I mean, whoever's on your team, peer support, whatever that is, they get to know everybody. So, because this is a team approach. Also, again, like I said, reviewing the lease agreement. I have multiple degrees and it's difficult for me to understand a lease agreement. There's so much legal lease language in there. Um, Also, understanding the tenant's rights, their responsibilities as a tenant. If they invite somebody over and their friend fights with the neighbor or destroys property, they could be evicted for that. And they're responsible for anything that their friend does when they come over. So, like, understanding those types of things are extremely important. Provide a move-in packet with key contacts. One of the things we used to do, folks had Obama phones back in the day. We would plug in all of our phone numbers, the landlord's phone number, the maintenance man's phone number, the housing specialist, everybody's phone number. I would help them. I'd program it in their phone, help them call and understand how to do that. Excuse me. And also, we would do, hey, how you doing visits, right? And then so that first week is probably that, you want to go over there and see what's really happening and, go into their unit and bring them a food box or bring them a gift certificate or bus passes, whatever you guys have available, just to get your foot in the door and see what's going on. And maybe even a magnet. And then we would put it on the refrigerator door and it had resources in the community. They had our phone numbers again on that. It had everything so that they were able to feel welcome. And somebody mentioned four roofs. I'm sorry, four walls and a roof. And that's so important that we remember that. What makes a house a home? That we want to make sure people feel like that this is their home and they have pride in where they live. And it's about community integration. You're integrating people into a community. You want them to feel a part of that. One of the things I would also encourage you is to build trust with folks to avoid overwhelming people when they first move in and gradually introduce new information. And also, does your tenant have their basic needs met? Sometimes we forget, we pat our, I used to do this all the time. I used to be so excited because I got somebody housed. I pat myself on the back and say, go, Nikki, I'm the best. And then, not understanding when they got into their house that they may have not had access to food. I didn't know if they had food stamps or not, or they had nowhere to get a food box. Do they have hygiene items? Women who are menstruating, how do they access feminine hygiene products? Do they have furniture? Do they have a bed to sleep on? I mean, all of these types of things that we take for granted sometimes, plates, dishes, I mean, all of these things. We would do move-in kits for folks. So they would get this move-in box that had all the things kind of you would send somebody off to who's going to college or their first apartment to kind of get them started. Shower curtains, furnish, uh plates, forks, all that good stuff. And also support them in setting up their utilities. Sometimes folks have never done that before, and they may not know how to do that. And also understanding what their rental payment is, understanding what their portion is. Have they ever had to go get a money order and write that amount in there? I mean, walking people through these things are extremely important in their long-term success. And you also want to ensure that the tenant has developed a routine for those rent payments and home maintenance. Do they know what again, writing out the portion, talking through it with them, having them do it themselves. It's really important that you're teaching people independent living skills, but also not just leaving them to fend for themselves, especially if they may have a traumatic brain injury. We know a lot of people are on the spectrum, may have autism. I mean, there's so many things, all disabilities are not seen. We want to make sure that we are meeting people where they're at and supporting them. So as much as we can to support them at the beginning so that they can be successful long term. And also, do people know how to access the public transportation? Sometimes folks do. Sometimes we think people know how to do these things and they may not. So making sure they understand that. Do they know where the local grocery store is? Do they know where their pharmacy is? Do they know about their appointments, how to get there? All those things that we need to support folks. And one of the other things I would talk about at the beginning is assessing and goal setting. So conduct an intake assessment, like what is their physical and mental health like? Do they have substance use? Are they using substances? What is their income? All those things that you want to make sure that you are taking in, maybe creating some intake assessment forms that are very simple so that this is something that is kept in their file and it's something that you're noting so that whoever picks up this person's caseload knows what's going on with this person. Also address any immediate health concerns right away, because sometimes those physical health concerns could, people can wind up in the hospital and 911's being called and all those things. And identifying those key priorities, like do they have medical appointments or mental health appointments that they need to attend to and keep to. Crisis planning. This is extremely important. Always plan if the person goes to jail, if the person goes to the hospital, if they're hurt, what happens? Who are we allowed to contact? Do you have an ROI with that person? Do they say contact my mom, but don't contact my brother or vice versa? Making sure there's a crisis plan in place of how the rent's going to get paid. How long are they going to be out of their unit? Who do you contact if that were to happen? So making sure that you have crisis planning is extremely important. Ask them what worked well for them in the past when they were housed and what did not work well. You'll find out a lot of information and you'll see how best that you can support someone. I kind of alluded to this earlier, daily living skills. This is so important. Do they know how to work appliances? Sometimes we put folks in there, they've never, number one, there's new appliances. Maybe they had an apartment 10 years ago, the appliances are completely different. Here in Arizona, it gets to 115 degrees. In the summertime, I had a lady who was in her apartment. She didn't know how to turn on her air conditioning. She was sitting there in a hot box, basically just sweating because she didn't know how to turn on her air conditioning. Do people know how to access their heating, do their microwave, stove, or even do their own chores? So sometimes we take for granted these things. So making sure that, walking through with someone so that they understand what to expect in the unit by themselves and what those daily chores are like. And do they know the resources in the community? Again, how do you access food if they need food, utility assistance, any of those types of things? And do they know how to find culturally relevant resources in the community? You know, I live in Arizona. We have a lot of indigenous tribes here. We connect people to indigenous led ceremonies because some folks would prefer that over traditional mental health services. So making sure we're supporting people based on their culturally relevant services that they choose. Again, education on household management, such as cleaning, conflict resolution. I kind of alluded to that earlier about dealing with your neighbor, or you could have a jerk landlord. We know this happens all the time. How do you, teaching folks conflict resolution and time management skills is extremely important. Community engagement, encouraging people so that they feel integrated into their community through peer support and local activities, or their drop-in centers, all of those types of things. Can they volunteer? A lot of folks like animals. I know that our local animal shelter is always looking for volunteers. Find out what they like to do. Also, employment education. We can't forget people can work and want to work and want to feel like they're a part of, the larger society. So connecting people to job training programs, vocational programs, and literacy services is extremely important. What are those AA and NA substance use services? What are we would leave folks the list of all the AA and NA meetings that were happening around them based on their zip code. And that was helpful to them. And some of the things to think about, again, I'm reiterating a lot of this again. So strategies for success, what to do. Continue to go over the lease. It's not just one and done. It's not just, oh, I told him about the lease 6 months ago. You want to continue to talk to folks about the do's and don'ts in their lease, and create a secondary contact person if you're not available for the landlord or participant. So if I'm not available, they always know they can contact Kimberly, right? Kimberly's going to be available, and people know that. So if I'm not available, there's somebody available if a crisis occurs or something happens. That, have regular check-ins with tenants and landlords. I always say this. When you go check on your tenants, check on the landlord. Say, because the landlords see that as, wow, they really are here all the time. They're really engaged. They know what's going on. So check in with them just to say, hi, how are you doing? Also, number one, of course, is prevent evictions whenever possible. If you can mitigate that, you're doing a big service to the people in your program. And learn the legal responsibilities of landlords and tenants. Learn about your local fair housing laws. Learn your organization's policies on landlord relationships. What does that look like? Are there MOUs executed? What those MOUs say? And learn how to complete a mutual rescission of a lease if necessary. Do you all know what a mutual rescission of a lease is? Yes, no?
I'd love to hear about it.
Okay. So mutual rescission of a lease is basically when you go to the landlord and you say, hey, I know this person, you guys, it's not working here. I know this person doesn't want to stay here. You don't want them here. Can you not go to court to evict them? Can we just say, okay, Johnny's going to be out in 10 days or 2 weeks or whatever it is. And and it's basically saying both sides are going to walk away, no harm, no foul. Of course, you get this in writing, but basically saying they're not going to go to the courts. They're not going to go file a judgment or the formal eviction process against your client. And different states have different names for it, but in Arizona, it's called a mutual rescission of a lease. Even if your landlord is threatening eviction, you could go to them and ask for, say, hey, can we just, you don't have to go to court. We're going to have Johnny out of here in 10 days or 14 days, whatever. Can we just kind of both of us walk away and no harm, no foul? So also, what is the free legal aid in your aid organizations in your area? That's really important too. If sometimes, landlords do violate the fair housing laws and violate the rights of your tenants. So making sure you know those free legal aid services in your area. And who are the community and family supports for the participant? Who do you call? Like if they want something or who they can rely on or support them. Who are those folks? Do you have an ROI release of information signed with them to make sure that you can talk to them if you know there's something happening? And what organizations can provide additional support, like I said, peers, NA, AA, drop-in centers. And also, I talked about this earlier, creating an emergency contact list for the participants that has the housing specialist, case manager, landlord, maintenance, food utilities, crisis numbers, putting that crisis number in there as well, in case you're not available right away. If somebody is in crisis, they know who to call. And I think that's extremely important that we provide that information for folks. And as a team approach, ensure a written procedures in place for resolving disagreements between landlords and tenants. If you don't have one, maybe you create a policy or a procedure to deal with that. And create weekly team meetings to discuss tenants and any additional supports needed from someone in your housing program. And create a group text with your colleagues, a Teams channel, anything like that. Do you guys, does anybody have any great ideas that they're currently doing with you as teams? Come on, y'all.
We have weekly, we call them staff meetings, but they are team meetings, and we talk about our participants in our program. Some of them are houseless, others are housed, so we will talk about, the needs of everyone. And with the individuals who are housed, we'll talk about like what are their needs right now. Are they needing to connect to another service? We also talk about like what could they use in the house to make it more livable if it's like someone who's just moved in, things like that.
Nice. That's a great example. Great example. So another pop quiz. What should you guys look for in the first week somebody moves in? What would be the first thing you think you should look for when someone moves into their apartment?
Do you mean like look for
When somebody move, what should you do in the first week? Like supporting the individual, what you should do in the first week to support an individual?
in the past, I have helped residents turn on their utilities,
Right,
with them directly to the places to help them set that up.
great. And if you're going by somebody's apartment, what would you be looking for? Yeah, somebody said household supplies, utilities, rent, insurance needed. What about food, right? Do they have their medications? Sometimes we would go in there with the intention of kind of seeing what's going on in the apartment, but dropping off something to get our foot in the door. Because sometimes you'll see there's a bunch of beer cans or clothes and belongings for somebody else that's not on the lease. There could be all kinds of things. So just good to get your foot in the door and see what's happening. Um, so I want to talk about the importance of positive landlord relationships. Some of this will be repetitive from what I kind of talked about earlier. So building your relationship with the landlords in the community, building that trust through personal outreach, meet landlords face to face or call them personally to explain your programs and goals. And be transparent. Clearly explain how the rent payments will be made, who provides the case management, and what supports are in place for the tenants. And always follow through. Always do what you say you'll do. Landlords value reliability. And I've done landlord focus groups, and one of their biggest complaints is that people don't call them back. Like they house somebody's participant and they never hear from that organization again. And that's a big no-no. You want to continue to keep communicating as much as possible. Refrain from words like hard to serve people or clients. I'm using it interchangeably right now, but it's important that you're not the folks that are being housed are tenants. They're tenants just like you and I. They're under a lease just like anybody else, and we treat them as such. So you don't want to talk to landlords and talk about, I have a bunch of hard to serve people. That's not going to go over very well. And offer landlord education sessions, host or join community meetings to explain the benefits of partnering with housing programs, to debunk the myths about homelessness and the folks that you all are serving. Use peer testimonials, use success stories from other landlords who have had a good experience with your program if possible. One of the things I would do as well is I would go to the dollar store, and I'd print out, I get those dollar store frames and I'd print out certificates for my landlords, and they love those. It didn't cost a lot of money, but it went long way, and they really appreciated it. They hung them in their office because they are supporting the community at large. They are doing that we need our landlords, and they're important to the work that we're doing. And tell your landlords why they should work with your program. Develop your messaging. Do you have an elevator speech? Emphasize the benefits. You have guaranteed or timely rental payments. You have ongoing tenant support services. Because despite what people say, folks that are not in our programs also cause a lot of problems, and they don't have the support that you guys provide. So that is a benefit. The reduced turnover and vacancy time in a unit, which is helps the landlord. And also, if you guys have risk mitigation or damage reimbursement funds, that's a good draw as well. And be supportive, offer ongoing support. Again, if you can get assign a landlord liaison or one point of contact person who's available when you are not, and always have a backup. And that landlord, just like your your participants should know who that backup person is when you're not available, so should the landlord. And if you guys are having your team meetings and communicating and putting it in your notes, then everybody should know what's happening with that participant. So if you get a call from the landlord, you're like, yeah, Nikki's doing what Nikki does again. We know what we're going to be out there. We'll go talk to them. And also, again, number one, answer your phone calls and emails. Develop a protocol of hopefully 24 to 48 hours that you or someone on your team can respond to any issues from the landlords. Conduct regular check-ins 30, 60 days after move-in, then quarterly if possible. What I would do is I would call them on the second or third day of the month. I'd have a list of my landlords to call them and say, hey, did Nikki pay her rent? I just want to make sure everything's going okay. And they could tell me yes or no, and that helps me, and it doesn't get into any late fees because I'm able to get in there in time. Again, provide conflict resolution, share updates on available incentives for incentives on your program, or if you have a new program. One of the things is only promise what you can control. Don't say there will never be any problems with Nikki. She's going to be great. She'll never do anything. She'll pay her rent always on time, because you don't know what's going to happen, right? But do promise to make sure someone is available from your organization when the landlord has questions or concerns. That's the best that you can do at that point. And promise to support your tenants and promise to help address any problems that occur. I've already said this, be proactive with your landlords and tenant. So when you're going to visit your participants, say, hey, how's your mental health? How's your physical health? How are you getting along with your neighbors? Are you having any issues in your apartment? Are you able to find your way around the neighborhood? Do you have, all those types of things. Hey, do you have the stuff to clean with? Do you have cleaning supplies? Have you found everything? And also with the landlords, answer your phone calls, call at least monthly to check in. If there are any issues or concerns with, and ask, say, is there any issues or concerns with Nikki? And again, who does the landlord contact if there's an emergency? Again, I've talked about the certificates, thank you notes, respond to calls, invite landlords to sit on your boards. If you're a nonprofit, the best way you can draw up business is ask landlords to contribute to your committees and your boards. Mediate any disputes between program participants, landlords, show them that you're happy to see them. And one of the things too is cut checks quickly and always on time. And if you can, create a process to obtain feedbacks through either an annual survey or focus group with your landlords. Again, landlords are so important, and it's important to recognize and retain them. If you can, host an annual landlord appreciation breakfast or luncheon, create a landlord partner network, invite your landlords to special networking or listening sessions. When you're doing celebrations of your participants, invite the landlords as well, where they can share feedback and ask for testimonials. Many landlords enjoy sharing their positive experiences, and these can be used to recruit other landlords. And also stay connected. Don't only reach out when you need housing, because that's gonna just, they're not gonna feel like they're a part of something bigger. Share updates with them, success data, any new incentive opportunities, and share landlord success stories with consent in your newsletters or on social media. You want to really draw up why it's important to participate. Woo! All right, that was a lot of information. So I am going to stop sharing, come on camera, and hopefully answer any questions and maybe go through the chat. You all have any questions? Was the information helpful, hopefully? Sally, thank you, Sally, for your thumbs up.
I'm trying to
Any
figure
questions?
out I'm trying to figure out how to I'm a volunteer who goes out and helps unhoused people in my neighborhood where I've lived for a long time, and many of them have also lived here for a long time. And I'm trying to figure out how to convince our policymakers that they deserve to be housed. And so I'm looking
Yeah,
for all kinds of ideas to suggest to try to figure out a way to do it that creates options that are appropriate to each person's individual circumstances and puts the resources together in a way to make it work. And I am on a mission to get this done. So this is super helpful. Thank you so much.
thank you, Sally. We appreciate your advocacy and what you're trying to do. So it's really hard out there, and I'm sure a lot of the folks on this call can attest to that as well. Anything else? Does anybody have any questions? Anything I can help with, troubleshoot?
I missed the first half of the meeting this morning. Will a recording be sent out later this week?
I'm going to defer to HCA, who may or may not be on the call.
Hello, my name is Crystal, the AA2 supporting the FCS team. I believe that we did submit a recording request for this webinar. So I do have a recording currently that is going. And if so, it will be available on our YouTube channel within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Crystal. Hugh Fernandez has their hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to address what the other person said before about how to, do more advocacy to get people to care about unhoused folks that are on the street. This is really like more outside of my direct organization that I work for, but it depends on the type of organization that you're in. But I've had situations where we've partnered with an agency that had a marketing team that had like a marketing specialist to talk about how we could create a campaign to like humanize some of the people that are on the street for us. We also have multiple active like resident and homelessness advocacy groups that are made up by folks in the community with lived experience. And we go to meetings, we go to town halls with our state legislators. We go to the capital of our state every year and talk to them in person more. and that has definitely helped. I think we did recently get a bill passed in our state that we'd fought for a really long time. Um, so I just wanted to mention that because I didn't want that person to go without any like sort of advice, and that's kind of worked for us, but it is difficult.
QQ. Yeah, I mean, I could give you like, I'm in Arizona, so it's hard for me to say what's legislatively happening in your community. But yeah, the most you can talk to your lawmakers, sit down with folks. Talking to people one-on-one is probably the best way at this point, as best you can to get your foot in the door. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a question. Do you have any resources or additional places to look? We're hiring for a landlord engagement specialist for our housing program and would love to have like some sort of additional training or support for that role.
So I guess I didn't get your question. What was the question? Or were
If
you
you know of
just
any like resources or any additional trainings for that type of role.
okay? So I mean, part of that you could use what I like this YouTube channel. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that they're going to upload this information. I'll share my slides with you all. I will be doing more training, but I could CSH Corporation for Supportive Housing is also a great resource as well.
I get there on their
Um,
listserv. Yep.
Okay, great. And then if you want to, off the top of my head, I can't think of everything right now, but if you want to email me, I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay.
You're welcome to email me and I could send you uh, some more
Ali-
resources.
Alicia, this is Kimberly with the Healthcare Authority.
Hi.
Um, I have a ton of training for housing specialists. So if you want to connect with me, I can get a person trained up. And we have a bunch of stuff on our Pathways to Housing website as well that are e-learning modules that
Oh, okay.
you can do as well. So if you want to connect with me after this, I can get you hooked up with all sorts of stuff.
Great. Could you put
Oh,
your
that's great.
in the chat?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. You're like Superwoman. You came right in the nick of time.
Thank you both.
Oh, Becky, I see your hand up.
Yeah, hi. In the beginning of this, I think you were talking about, individual people are making their own Excel spreadsheets and, with housing options and putting in the parameters and which is amazing. It sounds like a ton of work. I'm wondering, so I work at the University of Washington, the psychiatry department, and we have a little work group going, trying to think about, is it possible to have some sort of like smart database of housing options for people to access so that that each person doesn't have to create their own Excel spreadsheet so that you could go in and that, this one doesn't take this, but whatever, like some sort of smart way to do this better so that there's, what I'm
So that's a great question. So number one, I had an intern do that work. So that was kind of how was able to get it started. Because of course I had 20, almost 30 staff that were doing this day to day, and it's hard to
yeah,
pull them off of caseloads to be able to delve in. But I
yeah,
love the idea of creating maybe a larger, bigger system or database that somebody can manage. I mean, if you're at the university, so you got access to interns. That may be an intern project that you can have someone start, and you all, as a community, share those resources together. But
yeah,
but one of the biggest things that we found was hard is maintaining it, right?
yes,
So the
totally,
maintenance of when things change, and because it's a constant,
yeah,
changing, and landlords say, yeah, we will, no, we won't. So things change constantly. But I mean, to start with, you could start with interns. You have access to them at the university. So I would start there. But I mean, that's a larger, I think, community project.
yeah.
And I don't know if Kimberly, if you may have some additional information or support around that for a larger project.